Thank you. That concludes topical questions. The next item of business is a statement by Tom Arthur on community wealth building progress and future ambition. The Minister will take questions at the end of his statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on Tom Arthur. Up to 10 minutes, Minister.
Presiding Officer, I am pleased to have the opportunity to update Parliament on progress being made in advancing the community wealth building model of economic development across Scotland. I will also set out the Scottish Government's future ambitions for CWB. At the core of community wealth building's intention is the desire to retain more wealth in local areas by creating and sustaining more jobs, growing local firms and enabling local communities to own more assets. I don't think it would be presumptuous on my part to assume that all members would share those aims. By working in partnership with businesses and communities, Scotland's public sector can deliver on CWB policies by enabling more small, medium and first sector enterprises to win public sector contracts, encouraging adaptation of fair work practices by more employers, placing communities at the centre of dialogue about the ownership and use of public sector assets, supporting growth of local businesses and new forms of inclusive and democratic business models, and attracting new ethical investment and encouraging growth in that lending market. The areas of impact I highlight mirror the 5 pillars of the community wealth building model: spend, workforce, land and property, finance and inclusive business models. I have travelled around Scotland to meet those involved in CWB activity across these 5 pillars. I visited Mossgiel Farm in East Ayrshire, where the local authority awarded a contract to this organic farm to supply milk to schools in the council area. The farm also supplies the Scottish Government through working with our primary catering contractor. This is a good example of public sector spend procuring a quality product while enabling a local employer to thrive. Public procurement in Scotland contributes hugely to community wealth building ambitions. The most recent figures from financial year 21-22 indicate that of £16 billion of public procurement spend, £8.9 billion was spent with businesses with a Scottish postcode, and a high proportion of this spend was with Scottish SMEs. I know that the Federation of Small Businesses in Scotland is positive about the potential of CWB. Indeed, I think CWB is an example of the New Deal for business in action. Public procurement rules apply when the value of a contract exceeds a certain threshold. Respondents to the Community Wealth Building Bill consultation called for these thresholds to be reviewed. My colleague, the Minister for Public Finance, confirmed before Christmas that the Scottish Government will look again at these thresholds, and more detail on this will follow in due course. On the workforce pillar, many construction firms, for example, are working to develop fair and sustainable job outcomes for local people. Just one example involves Balfour Beatty working in partnership with the Civil Engineering Contractors Association Scotland and the University of the Highlands and Islands to promote the Association's Academy programme, offering local people the opportunity to upskill within civil engineering. Through our Fair Work First approach, the Scottish Government took action by introducing a requirement in 2023 for public sector grant recipients to pay at least the real living wage to all workers and provide appropriate channels for effective workers' voice, such as trade union recognition. Turning to the land and property pillar, the Community Empowerment Scotland Act 2015 has provided a framework to promote and encourage community empowerment and participation. In July 2022, I launched a review of the Act. The review focused on legislation which enhances community participation, community control of public assets and community planning. This 2-year review recently concluded. A main report will comment on the Act as a whole, and 2 further reports will provide findings on participation requests, which enable a legal route for community organisations to be involved in local service delivery and community asset transfers. These reports will be published in the early part of this year. With regard to supporting new inclusive business models to grow, Social Security Scotland, for example, are an active member of the Dundee City Public Sector Anchors Network and have developed their corporate procurement strategy to reflect CWB principles. They have set out how they will actively build supply chain resilience by working with supported businesses, SMEs and the third sector. I have seen how CWB influence has shaped local health services in Dundee. Newfield Medical Centre are one of, if not the first GP practice to run as a co-op in the UK. The team there successfully took over the practice in 2022 from the local health board and have seen significant growth since then, including profit which has been redistributed, leading to increased employment and setting up successful projects benefiting the community. Finally, exciting new developments in finance are assisting new community wealth building projects to thrive. Linlithgow Community Development Trust work with local community sports and community meeting facilities to support renewable energy. The Trust used community bonds in order to secure the finance necessary from local people to undertake a pilot renewable energy project with a local golf club. Communities are at the heart of the Scottish Government's renewable energy ambitions, and we are committed to working with industry to ensure the delivery of renewable energy comes with benefits for people in Scotland, including shared ownership and community benefit opportunities. Scotland has made good progress with this approach. Our National Community Benefits Register indicates that over £30 million worth of benefits have been offered to communities across Scotland in the last 12 months alone. I want to turn now to the Scottish Government's future ambitions for CWB in Scotland. To learn from international experience, I had the privilege of visiting Cleveland, Ohio, where CWB has its roots. Cleveland, like Preston in the north of England, where CWB was adopted early in a UK context, suffered from rapid deindustrialisation in the aftermath of high levels of unemployment, depopulation, poverty and deprivation. I witnessed a form of economically driven rebirth in Cleveland through the formation of new cooperative businesses contracting with large local anchor organisations in the health sector and other areas. Cleveland and Preston, like many Scottish towns and cities, continue to experience similar problems. This government is ambitious for all of Scotland's communities. We will continue to invest heavily to strengthen the hand of our villages, towns, cities and regions, while acting to ensure the social security system provides a robust safety net for those experiencing poverty and hardship. In particular, this government is focused on ridding Scotland of child poverty and all the harm it can have throughout a person's life. I think that community wealth building is both a strategic and practical model of economic development, provides a new opportunity for us to create a space between a supportive and progressive welfare state and a thriving new economy, spearheaded by innovative new sectors and growth clusters developing across Scotland. Some proponents of community wealth building use a phrase, redistribution, not redistribution, meaning achievement of an increase in assets owned or income earned by communities or local businesses and households, respectively. If this can be achieved, it could lead to a reduction in our reliance on social security. However, change like that will always take time. While we must invest in a person-centred social security system now and seek to grow the dynamic and progressive economy of the future, I think that the community wealth building model can help knit together opportunity and need by forming part of the necessary connection between economic development led by the public sector and those communities where people are looking for new opportunities to build and maintain household and collective wealth. I think that the CWB approach offers something new in the Scottish context, a strategic and place-focused brokerage place and conversation focused squarely on economic development and fair and responsible growth. Given the long history of relevant contributory work in Scotland, I can accept that there will be different views of what community wealth building is or should be. It is a clear economic policy. Public sector investment in health, housing, energy and many other areas is relevant. However, the aim of CWB is to ensure maximisation of the economic agency of all the investment power together. Not all of the examples I mentioned earlier are born of discrete community wealth building policies or action plans. Rather, they are clearly relevant activity to achieving community wealth building ambitions. People who ask what community wealth building is will get two answers from me. The first is that it is an operable, place-focused model of economic development, the pillars of which can guide use of all of the money at the disposal of the public sector. The second answer is that, in activity terms, relevant actions are wide and varied. However, at its core is the idea that every public pound spent has the potential to drive economic growth and realise fairness and prosperity. The current programme for government includes a commitment to introduce primary legislation on community wealth building in this parliamentary year. Working on that is in train, informed by a public consultation conducted in 2023. The current programme for government also noted that a local government-led community wealth building practice network should be created. It is now in place. The network is proving to be an effective practice for facilitating engagement. Among its key roles will be working with the Scottish Government on how we can better measure the practical impact of community wealth building across Scotland. Members will understand that the parliamentary process must be respected, and I cannot answer questions on potential provisions in the legislation today. However, I do look forward to working with colleagues when the legislation is introduced. My door will always be open for discussions on how we can make community wealth building as impactful as possible in driving economic growth that is fair, environmentally responsible and sustainable. To end my remarks, I want to be clear that community wealth building has a long history of work aimed at ensuring as much wealth as possible can be retained in communities, and that the damage caused by rapid removal of economic activity in many of our industrial communities is addressed. In community wealth building, I think we have a very practical policy approach for all of Scotland's public sector to pursue in partnership with business, the third sector and communities that can, in a more consistent way, bring all relevant activity together to revitalise an approach to local and regional economic development that is focused on real places and delivering for people and communities.
Thank you. The Minister will now take questions on the issues raised in his statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes, after which we'll need to move on to the next item of business. Anyone wishing to ask a question should press the request to speak buttons, and I call first Murdo Fraser.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Minister for advance sight of his statement? The concept of community wealth building is widely supported in relation to the potential benefits to local economies. But a bit like the term well-being economy, community wealth building means different things to different people. And we might therefore have hoped for some more clarity today from the Government as to what exactly it is planning to do in this space. Instead, we have a statement that's very long on words, but woefully short on any practical proposals or detail. So in an effort to try and get some detail, can I ask three specific questions? Firstly, the Minister says in his statement, this is a clear economic policy. But he goes on to say, people who ask what community wealth building is will get two answers from me. So what is the answer? And will economic growth be at the heart of what the Government is trying to do here? Secondly, Presiding Officer, ever since the programme for government back in September, we've been waiting for details of what the forthcoming bill will say. We have no more information today as to what will be in this bill. We are waiting, and stakeholders are waiting. So when will we learn? Because time is running out in the current parliamentary year. And thirdly, Presiding Officer, in relation to public procurement, again, we are waiting to hear from this Government when they will decide on the review of thresholds, which business is waiting for, particularly small business wanting to win public sector contracts. When will this happen?
Minister.
To Mr Fraser for his question and his interest in this topic. On the timelines for the bill, it really just is a matter of respecting parliamentary protocol and procedure. The commitment within the PFG was to introduce within this parliamentary year. That's what we intend to achieve. With regards to the contents of the bill, again, due to protocol and procedure, I cannot divulge the contents, but I would refer the member to the consultation and the analysis that was published, which set out very clearly what the Government's thinking on the bill was at the time the consultation was run. Yes, on the question of economic growth, I made reference to that in my speech. That is fundamental. But what we want to see is more of the wealth that is generated within communities, retained within communities. And to really define what community wealth building is, it's about greater retention of wealth in local communities and greater local control exercised over that wealth. That supports resilience, and that is fundamentally what we're seeking to achieve through community wealth building. And it is something which builds upon a lot of existing work, including public procurement as well. And again, as my colleague Ivan McKee had said before Christmas, and I alluded to, Government Ministers will be setting out shortly in terms of what the process will be around consideration of the existing thresholds under procurement legislation, and Parliament will be kept up to date. But once the legislation is before Parliament, I will be more than happy to engage with members on the detail.
Daniel Johnson.
I thank the Minister for prior sight of this statement. And while I found the statement interesting in terms of context and examples, what it is short of is practical steps as to how the Scottish Government will seek to implement this. So I agree with him about public sector procurement and SMEs, but the reality is, since 2016-17, the proportion of Scottish public sector spending with micro operators has fallen from 7% to 4.7%. So can I ask him what practical assistance will be provided to SMEs to bid for public contracts and to ensure that they win them? And that, likewise, what capital will be made available to grow the sorts of organisations he's talking about? Will this become a core mission of Scottish Enterprise and the Scottish National Investment Bank?
Minister.
With regards to the point around growing the number of micro businesses which are successful, I agree that is absolutely vital. And it is these kind of businesses are the exact example of who we want to see thrive within our local communities, because they tend to be rooted in their communities. They will tend to procure goods and services from other businesses within their communities, and they will tend to recruit from within their communities. And that is how public sector procurement can drive retention of local wealth and local growth, and with it being local businesses, result in local control being exercised over that. So within the context of public procurement, we already have existing frameworks of support, whether that be through the Supplier Development Programme, the regular engagement that takes place, the Centres of Excellence in Procurement, all contribute towards facilitating the participation of an ever-increasing range of suppliers within procurement. But I recognise that there's more we can do, and we have an opportunity to consider that specifically through the work of the review of thresholds. More broadly, with regards to enterprise agencies, there's already a lot of positive work that goes on supporting community wealth building, whether that be Cooperative Development Scotland within SE, the work at HIDU, or indeed the work of SOSI. And I would be more than happy to share with the members some of the excellent work that South of Scotland Enterprise is doing around community wealth building, which I think you would find quite interesting.
Eleanor Whittam, to be followed by Pam Gossel.
Can I ask the Minister how the Scottish Government is supporting local areas to use community wealth building as a golden thread that runs through everything, including planning, economic development, procurement, further education, local development and community place plans, in order to ensure that community wealth building is a practical place-focused model which sees a shift in balance of power to communities, enabling a greater stake in how their local economy functions for the benefit of all? And can I thank him for highlighting the excellent example of partnership working between Muskiel Farm and East Ayrshire Council, my constituency, that demonstrates what is possible if you actually look at public procurement in a different way. This has been operating for a long time in East Ayrshire in terms of local procurement for school meals, etc. So there is the art of the possible there. Thanks for highlighting that, Minister.
Thank you. Before calling the Minister, I just remind the Chamber there's a lot of interest in this, so we'll need slightly briefer questions. Minister.
There was a huge amount in Eleanor Whittam's question, and I thank her for what she's set out, and also recognise her long-standing interest in this, and particularly her own constituency. With regards to some of the work that's been undertaken, she'll be familiar with the £3 million that was allocated as part of the Ayrshire Growth Deal. There was the 5 pilot areas that we supported across Scotland as well. There is the practitioners network that's set up. There was funding that we provided to support the development of best practice guidance. So there's been a range of activity that the Scottish Government has undertaken in partnership with other organisations and local government to increase awareness and understanding of community wealth building and helping practitioners to identify opportunities to implement it. So in terms of how we will be seeking to build upon that work, to accelerate that work, legislation, of course, will be something that we are committed to bringing forward. We'll have a role to play in that as well. But the key point that Ms Whittam raises is the need for this to be seen as a golden thread that runs through all work, and indeed it builds on a lot of quite mature work across a number of discrete areas. This brings a strategic coherence to it, which can really help to affect economic change at the local and regional level.
Thank you. Probably a little bit more brevity in responses as well. Pam Gossel, to be followed by Ben McPherson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The role of local business is vital to generating community wealth. Unfortunately, confidence among Scotland's small businesses has fallen to its lowest level since the height of the pandemic. Both the Labour UK Government and the SNP Scottish Government have presided over a high tax regime by imposing national insurance hikes and by refusing to fully pass down business rates relief respectively. Presiding Officer, let me remind the Minister, governments do not create growth, it comes from businesses. The latest double whammy of high taxes, from the Scottish and UK governments mean that the pillars mentioned by the Minister are already crumbling. Does the Minister not agree that his government has stifled Scotland's economic growth?
Minister.
Growth comes from business, but growth comes from social partnership and sector and the widest thing possible engagement. This sort of 1980s hyper-libertarian approach, which is implicit in the members' comments, is just completely sort of out of date and missing the point. What we are talking about is a constructive partnership approach between business, the third sector and government. That's what can drive and sustain local and regional economic growth from which everyone can benefit.
Thank you. Ben McPherson, to be followed by Paul Sweeney.
One of the organisations that the Minister has engaged with in recent years is the North Edinburgh Response and Recovery Group in my constituency, a remarkable coalition that established to respond to the pandemic, but has since been engaged in both sharing knowledge and generating lasting positive change. I highlighted the R2 group to the Minister, and through that engagement secured 2 paid staff members to help with the organisation in community wealth building in North Edinburgh. Therefore, could the Minister say what reflections he and his officials are taking from the experience of what's happening in North Edinburgh, which is almost organic community wealth building, and also how local representatives can engage constructively with the government to achieve practical change and investment in their communities?
Before calling the Minister, I have made now 3 appeals for brevity in questions. Can we have a bit more brevity? Otherwise, members who want to ask a question are not going to get an opportunity. Minister.
In the interest of brevity, let me thank Mr McPherson for his previous engagement and recognise the sterling work that has taken place in the north of Edinburgh. I think the key point he highlights is how some of this activity is developing organically. And one of the key roles for government is to support and to facilitate that activity. We're recognising the need to drive forward national implementation, but also allowing for that local flexibility.
Thank you. Paul Sweeney, to be followed by Rona Mackay.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. The Minister didn't mention social housing in his statement, and I think it's important to note that this year marks half a century of community-based housing associations in Scotland. And just last year, Reid Vale Housing Association, one of the first, had to fight off a takeover. Will the Minister reflect on how we can strengthen the role of community-based housing associations as generators and agents of community wealth building in Scotland, perhaps through amendments to the Housing Bill?
Minister.
I think Mr Sweeney makes an excellent point. This is something I had a very constructive exchange and a visit in recent years with New Garbos Housing Association. I think I'm scheduled to take part in some of the engagements marking the 50th anniversary this year as well. So I absolutely recognise the crucial role that community-based housing associations have played in promoting community wealth building, and indeed will continue to do so, and happy to engage with the member on that.
Rona Mackay, to be followed by Lorna Slater.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Building capacity at local level can often present a challenge as enterprises struggle to meet the scale required for larger contracts. Can the Minister say more about how the Scottish Government is continuing to encourage and create opportunities for local procurement in a way that's achievable for local businesses, social enterprises and community groups?
Minister.
Yes, we work very closely with our partners in procurement across the public sector. Local government directly are centres of excellent expertise for procurement. We have a strong legislative framework for procurement, and as I touched on in earlier remarks, we'll be looking at the thresholds for regulated procurement as well.
Lorna Slater, to be followed by Willie Rennie.
Much of what is needed to grow community wealth and make sure people have a stake in Scotland's prosperity does not require primary legislation. So much action is needed alongside this bill. How and when will the Minister be enacting the recommendations of the Developing Scotland's Economy, Increasing the Role of Inclusive and Democratic Business Models report? And how will he ensure that communities who provide the land and coast where wind turbines, pylons and other green infrastructure are installed see material benefit from this, including lower energy bills?
Minister. On the point about, with regards to renewable energy, ensuring our communities can benefit fully from this revolution, she'll be aware of the work on the review of good practice guidelines, and she'll understand the reservations around that particular policy area to the UK Government. We want to work constructively to maximise opportunities for community benefit. In terms of non-legislative intervention, she's absolutely correct. This involves policy, it involves practice, as well as legislative aspects as well. Specifically on the Inclusive and Democratic Business Models Review, we have already committed to take forward the action for the Economic Democracy Group, and I hope to be in a position to update Parliament shortly on how we're taking that work forward.
Willie Rennie, to be followed by Claire Haughey.
Community benefit from the energy infrastructure and developments that's coming in the next few years could be significant for local communities, particularly in the Highlands. And I favour investment in housing and roads and infrastructure rather than necessarily just community facilities, because it could leave a lasting legacy for those areas. Does the Minister agree with that approach?
Minister.
This is a point I heard Willie Rennie make actually recently, maybe just just before recess. The point about lasting legacy is absolutely important. Of course, current spend can be beneficial, but if we, as a legacy of this, communities can have asset, if they can have control of wealth, if they can have control of capital, which they can then grow, and that can be revenue generating for them as well, that creates a real community empowerment. Not just the opportunity to engage or to be consulted, but economic empowerment through the control of assets, which can generate revenue, which then they can determine as a community how best to exercise. That is a real long-term vision and hope that community wealth building as a model can offer. So yes, I absolutely agree with the member on the need to ensure that community benefits ensure a lasting legacy.
Claire Hockey, to be followed by Craig Hoy.
The Scottish Government has made strides in promoting and increasing fair work employment across Scotland, and it's vital that we keep up momentum and ensure that those seeking fulfilling and fair work in Scottish communities can find it. Can the Minister elaborate on how the community wealth building approach can feed into the development of fair, resilient local labour markets?
Minister.
Fair work is, of course, one of the pillars of community wealth building. While employment law is reserved, we have sought over a number of years to use our convening power and indeed conditionality around public sector grants to drive forward fair work. With regards to the current UK Government's agenda of Make Work Pay and specifically the Employment Rights Bill, we have been engaging closely with the UK Government. We see this as an opportunity to put a lot of fair work first principles on a statutory footing. I think the real opportunity that community wealth building allows for is through the creation of more resilient and successful and more prosperous local labour markets. That creates more opportunities for high-paid jobs. The other aspect, of course, as well, is by increasing the share of the economy that is characterised by these inclusive and democratic business models, be these social enterprises, co-ops or EOs. That creates a significant opportunity for worker empowerment as well.
Craig Hoy, to be followed by Emma Harper.
Deputy Presiding Officer, in 2015, Strathclyde Pension Fund invested £15 million in an investment vehicle aimed at growing Scottish life sciences sector. Given the huge wealth that is held within Scottish local government pension funds, will the Government work with SNIB, the enterprise agencies and local authority pension fund trustees to see how they can invest in emerging Scottish industries and still deliver a positive return for those pension fund members?
Minister.
An excellent question on a substantive issue, and absolutely we want to be looking to ensure that all of our streams of financing and investment are aligned with community wealth building principles. And yes, that will be about the significant amounts of capital required for some of the most cutting-edge industries, but it will also be an opportunity as well to ensure that assets are created where local ownership and local control can be exercised, which can empower communities and give them that revenue-generating asset which can allow them to invest in projects that are important for their particular area.
Emma Harper, to be followed by Richard Leonard.
It is important that everyone in society benefits from economic growth, and I welcome the Scottish Government's commitment to a sustainable and inclusive economic model. Can the Minister say any more about how community wealth building initiatives will work to address regional, including rural wealth inequalities, including Dumfries and Galloway, for instance?
Minister.
Yes, absolutely. As I touched upon earlier, I would draw the members' attention to the work of South of Scotland Enterprise and Community Wealth Building. Community wealth building has actually seen some of its most enthusiastic adoption in our rural communities, including in the south of Scotland, also in the West Highlands as well. And I think part of that can be explained by the long legacy of land reform as well, because that has created a visceral cultural memory of the utter vital importance of the question of ownership and the economic resilience and the economic equity of a particular area. And that is what community wealth building is fundamentally about, the question of ownership, equity, control and fairness. So it is an absolutely vital policy intervention in promoting resilient regional economies and a more equitable and fair Scotland.
Thank you. Richard Leonard, to be followed by Fergus Ewing.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. South of Scotland Enterprise, High Scottish Enterprise, the Scottish National Investment Bank. Will the Minister place a statutory duty on them and not simply local councils to support cooperatives, worker-owned businesses and other democratic business models to flourish in the Scottish economy?
Minister.
I am not going to risk the wrath of the presiding officer or the Minister for Parliamentary Business, for that matter, by getting into any matters pertaining to the legislation. But I would advise the member to engage with the documentation that was published in relation to the consultation process. And subsequent to the bill being introduced in Parliament, I'll be more than happy to engage with him in any specific interest he has.
Thank you. And Fergus Ewing.
Presiding Officer, can I ask the Minister this? Community benefit of 5,000 per megawatt is all very well, and it's a benefit, but it's nowhere near as good as a share of community ownership. And when I was Minister, we had a community ownership scheme supported by CARES, by Local Energy Scotland, and this empowered communities. Why isn't the Scottish Government, with the UK Government, who have some of the requisite legislative powers, GB Energy and SNP, developing a community ownership scheme? And could I put it to the Minister that if he doesn't, and the Scottish Government don't do that, the objections to wind farm applications where communities have no stake of ownership in the future
thank you,
may be overwhelming?
Minister.
The point that the member raises about this question of ownership and in relation to community benefit, yes, community benefit of course brings considerable value and by definition benefit, but community ownership is a game changer for areas, and I agree in terms of ensuring public consent for projects. It can have an important role to play, but fundamentally it can be game changing in terms of the economic power that becomes available for communities. So I would want to ensure the member that I am engaging closely with my ministerial counterparts who lead on energy policy to ensure that we can work constructively to maximise opportunities for ownership as we progress through this renewable energy revolution.